But this year actually really feels different. My colleague and I, Charles Hatterfield on the ET team, tracked this stuff pretty closely, and we pulled some numbers. So in June 2019, when our annual meeting last met in person, the total number of EVs on the road was just over a million. I think it was 1.3 million. EV sales at that time were about 2% of all new vehicle sales in the US. Today, there are more than 2.6 million EVs on the road. That has doubled. And the EVs are now making up more than 6% of all new vehicle sales. So we're really seeing now what feels like an inflection point. So to get a sense of where we're going and where we think this market is headed, I'm pleased to announce today that EEI has just published a new update to our EV sales forecast through 2030. So on the next slide here, 26 million EVs on the road by 2030 is what we are projecting. So this is a consensus forecast based on 4 different independent estimates. And again, we're showing EVs are going to grow from about 2.6 million on the road today to more than 26 million in 2030, a factor of 10 growth here. In our previous forecast for 2030 that we published in 2018, we estimated the number of EVs on the road in 2030 would be around 18.7 million. So just in the last few years here, our forecast has gone up 40% for that 2030 timeframe. Yes, we're excited. The forecast, that wasn't an applause line in my notes, but I'll take it. Let's go for it. The forecasts are being revised upward to reflect an increasingly improving technology environment, dramatically more aggressive automaker targets, and growing customer demand, which we've heard throughout this conference. Just in the course of putting this analysis together, actually in the last several months, we had to update these numbers. And some of the signage had to go to print before we did that. So if you're really clever, you can find some of our signs around the reception here that had yet to reflect these new numbers. But we're excited about the market. It's difficult for event planning and print signage, but we're really excited about what's going on in the EV space. So the second element of our forecast is actually an EV infrastructure need assessment. So how many charging ports essentially do you need to support a population of more than 26 million EVs? This relies on a tool from the National Renewable Energy Lab, and we found that nearly 13 million charge ports are needed. So a couple of things to point out. The vast majority of those, about 3/4, are going to be at-home charging. We still believe that's the way to deliver energy at the lowest cost over a long duration at-home charging. That's both single-family homes, multifamily dwellings. The next most numerous set of charging will be public level 2 at long dwell locations like your workplace or at a destination. The last piece here is public DC fast charging. Now we're showing that we're going to need 140,000 ports by 2030 to support that population. You can see that's just a small sliver of what's needed overall in this context here, but it's a really important part of that puzzle because it helps deliver driver confidence. So we'll be talking more about that as we go through our program today. This forecast is now live on EEI's website. Please check us out. Tell us what you think. Again, my colleague Charles here can help answer questions about how we put this together. Really excited about it. So that's where the EV market is headed, but let me give you a quick roadmap for where we're headed today just in this electric transportation experience. We're going to start right away with heavy-duty vehicle electrification. Really excited about that. We're going to start really big. After that, we'll have a couple of our member company executives talking about the National Electric Highway Coalition and how we're helping to solve that DC fast charging piece on public roads. Then we'll have 2 panel sessions on some of the innovative solutions and technologies that companies are bringing to market and how they're partnering with our EEI member companies to connect to customers. So we've got a jam-packed lineup for you today. We're really excited for you being here and experiencing it with us. We probably won't have time for a lot of Q&A, but our folks here will all be around to talk to you afterwards. So we'll jump right in. Like I said, we're going to start big by focusing on the electric semi-truck from Daimler. So after a short video here, Rakesh Aneja, who's the Vice President and Chief of eMobility for Daimler Truck North America, will be able to share with you his perspective on fleet electrification. So let's go to that video now.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Kellen, for that nice introduction showcasing our new baby, our all-electric, brand-new Freightliner eCascadia. This truck has certainly been a labor of love for my entire team and our entire company as well. Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity to share our perspective as a truck OEM. This is my first time in the conference. Really energized by the conversations I was part of, and look forward to sharing our truck OEM perspective with you in the next few minutes. Please allow me to suggest 4 key takeaways of the presentation right at the onset. Number 1, our world is changing. We are embarking on a monumental shift to new technologies that upend a 125-year history of single-source energy. You, the utilities, are the new fuel supplier. Number 2, electric trucks are being delivered to customers now. The demand is high, and the new fuel must be available to allow ramp up at scale. Number 3, we must work together to make this electric transition a success. We at Daimler Truck North America can provide data-based insights to ensure that the new fuel is available where and when the trucks need them. Number 4, there is no time to lose. We are at the tipping point. Without trucks, the world would indeed be a much different place. Trucks and buses are the necessary tools to keep our world moving. The US has one of the largest highway networks in the world. In fact, there are over 160,000 miles of highways in the national highway system. We are also a land of unrelenting demand for freight movement. Our freight demand is among the highest in the world, moving about 10 billion tons of goods worth approximately $670 billion. We can thank our truckers for over 70% of all freight moved in the United States. In a world without trucks, we would quickly run out of medical supplies, clean water, food, clothing, fuel, and other products and services necessary for our survival. Essentially, we would be sitting here naked and hungry. Probably not a very pretty sight. This brings me to the reason why I'm here today. Our world is changing as we begin a monumental shift to new technologies. It is the beginning of an entire paradigm shift in our nation, our world, and in our industry's history. One that includes a move to complete decarbonization, improved sustainability, and of course, zero-emission trucks. In fact, our new battery electric Freightliner Cascadia, eCascadia, is just coming off of the production line. The change is getting real. This electric truck was not developed in a vacuum. In fact, already back in 2018, we established a customer experience fleet of approximately 40 pre-production battery electric medium and heavy-duty vehicles so that our customers could use these trucks and test the integration of the technology firsthand into their large-scale fleet operations, while providing real-time feedback and data back to us and to themselves to help shape the future of CO2 neutral transportation. The more miles these trucks operated in real-world operations, the more we learned and the more experience our customers gained. More than 45 of our customers were able to test these trucks in real-world operation in the United States and Canada, and we had about 40-odd trucks running, and collectively we had about 1 million miles, more than 1 million miles of real-world fleet experience. If you haven't had the chance already, you can see one of these pre-production trucks right outside. You won't miss it. It's the only one out there, so please do go check it out. And in the last 2 years, we have certainly put our vehicle technology to the test through this 1 million mile customer experience fleet that I mentioned. In addition, we also needed to step into the ecosystem space, walking through the infrastructure development process firsthand over and over again. The purpose was really to co-create, collaborate with our customers, utilities, charging providers, and other stakeholders to learn, to do our homework, to ensure that we understand what this transformation means firsthand. This generation truck is very well suited to drayage, pickup and delivery, and other short-haul applications that are served by depot charging. It has a typical range of about 230 miles. I am, of course, very bullish, extremely bullish to electrify our entire portfolio. My company is very enthusiastic about the opportunity, and our engineers are feverishly working to convert that vision into reality. The truth, however, is it'll take some time for the technology to catch up to the demands of all of our diverse applications. It'll take some time for the cost to come down with volume manufacturing, with improvement in battery technology, so that the costs work out for our customers. Total cost of ownership is a key metric in our industry. And we want that cost to work out independent of government subsidies and incentives, while they're very much needed initially to seed the market. Of course, we are not operating in a silo. We listen to our customers, and I can tell you they are very, very eager. We just announced 4 weeks back that Cisco, the leading global food service distribution company, will deploy nearly 800 e-Cascadias by 2026, with delivery starting later this year. You will see more and more of these trucks on the road in real-world customer use. We are beyond testing. We are at a tipping point. We are at a tipping point of forever changing commercial transportation, and with it, our world. If, or rather, when, we can overcome the challenges to get there. I shouldn't say if, because that's really not an option. We have to be successful, so it's a question of when and how. Providing reliable trucks that are cost-effective for our customers is the fundamental mission of my company. We have spent a long time perfecting the formula, and we are committed to doing so as we ramp up zero-emission trucks as well, both battery electric today and hydrogen-powered in the future. Arguably, the biggest hurdle in the way forward is an effective surrounding support system to refuel these trucks. In addition to medium and heavy-duty electric trucks, we also produce battery electric school buses to transport our most precious cargo, our children. We've delivered over 100 of these electric buses, affectionately called Julies, to school districts all over the country, and the numbers are continuously growing. We are also deploying battery electric walk-in vans for final mile delivery. These are segments with dedicated, repeatable routes which rely on central depots for recharging. Theoretically, these are ideal applications for the current state of the technology, and more importantly, the current state of the infrastructure. However, even at a depot level, the infrastructure still faces several challenges in siting, in equipping, and in permitting. If the infrastructure is not ready, these vehicles are at risk of becoming stranded assets, because trucks, by and large, are customized to each customer's specifications. And in most cases, they cannot be redeployed to fulfill another customer order. Developing the infrastructure and overcoming the grid challenges specifically for commercial transportation will be our focal point for the next few years. We cannot rely on passenger car charging network to recharge our trucks. Believe me, we've tried. The picture here shows our engineers being creative and trying to charge a Class 8 heavy-duty truck in a Walmart parking lot. If Stephen, Chris from Walmart is here, my apologies for the inconvenience caused to your customers, but this example is really perfect to show that we need specific infrastructure focus for commercial transportation. What we experienced is a lot of discontent and pain points, limitation on space, slower charging speeds, and as I mentioned, a few bemused and bewildered customers, but quite a few annoyed ones as well. As we launch our battery electric trucks and the hydrogen fuel cell trucks that will follow, we must continue to support our customers' success. It's not enough to only introduce a zero-emission truck to the market for their businesses and simply say, have a nice day. Instead, we need to offer them holistic support to fully transition from conventionally powered trucks. That holistic support includes consulting services as well as charging infrastructure services. As we all look at bringing battery electric vehicles to market at scale, we are graduating the traditional nature of our work as truck and engine OEMs to embrace something new to all of us, the ecosystem. As one example, let me show you some exclusive insights from our telematics data and how we are using data analytics to anticipate the demand for battery electric vehicles. What you see in this animation is the anticipated demand from a hotspot of charging need in the near future. We took 160,000 trucks worth of data, today's diesel trucks, and we analyzed them from a variety of different metrics and applied a lot of filters. What is the typical what is the typical duration of that trip? How many trucks are stopping at a particular location? What is the dwell time for those trucks? And crystallizing all of that data, we were able to come up with these hotspots of charging needs where we anticipate those infrastructure needs to be required very, very shortly. We are working on customer sites, looking to deploy over 50 e-Cascadias at a particular location. These will typically be requests of 2 to 5 megawatts at each location. And I understand that traditionally utilities wait for customer applications to add distribution capacity. We really have to change that, or there will be vehicles with no means to charge. We want to collaborate. We want to offer you the data you need to anticipate and be prepared for the soon approaching demand and start upgrading your grid now. Whether an OEM, a regulatory body, a utility, let's solve these issues together. There is no other option. Given the enormity of the challenge ahead of us, strategic partnerships are going to be essential for success. One of my favorite quotations is the African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. As a very nice example of a successful strategic partnership, last year we launched Electric Island in our own hometown of Portland, Oregon. Working in close collaboration with our local utility, Portland General Electric, our teams designed, built, and now operate the nation's first-of-a-kind Electric Island public charging station for medium and heavy-duty commercial vehicles. On a regular basis, I see commercial vehicles and passenger cars pulling in and out every day, which shows that when we start with a commercial vehicle first mindset for infrastructure, we see the benefits trickling down to the rest of the on-road transportation like passenger cars as well. The reverse is not necessarily true, as we saw from the Walmart parking lot example. I'd like to thank my friend and industry colleague, Maria Pope. I'm not sure if she's in the audience here. There she is. Thank you, Maria, for your leadership and partnership on this significant initiative. Much appreciated. As another example of a strategic partnership, we have signed a memorandum of understanding with ev.energy and BlackRock Renewable Power to build and operate a public infrastructure network for battery charging and hydrogen fueling. This will make zero-emission freight haulage possible for a much wider segment of the market. Our proposed solution will be dual purpose, accessible to both commercial vehicles and passenger cars, but really with a dedicated focus for commercial vehicles for the reasons I outlined earlier. In addition to affordability, beyond the question of reliability, the ability for fleets to access both public charging and depot charging on customer premises will be the single largest enabler for widespread adoption. Only then will we be successful in our transformation endeavors to keep the world moving sustainably. Finally, let me summarize my 4 key takeaways once again. Number one, our world is changing. We are embarking on a monumental shift to new technologies that upend a 125-year history of single-source energy. You, the utilities, are the new fuel supplier. Number two, electric trucks are being delivered to customers now. The demand is high, and the new fuel must be available to allow ramp up to scale. We must work together to make this electric transition a success. We at DTNA can provide database insights to ensure that the new fuel is available where and when the trucks need them. Number four, there is no time to lose. We are at the tipping point. Thank you very much for indulging me this afternoon. Thank you.
It's quite an avenue. One amazing boulevard.
Electric Avenue. And then we'll take it higher.
An electric superhighway. Powered by more clean energy, pulsing through America's most intelligent grid. We are building one of the largest fast charging networks in the state, ready to fuel the EV revolution. And soon, home charging with unlimited nights and weekends. That's more clean, affordable energy everywhere it's needed. Or never needed. Because as ready as we are for the future that's already here, we'll be out front to light the way forward.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rakesh, for that great presentation. Again, we don't have time for questions for him now, but he'll be around. I also want to make sure we shout out Diego Quevedo, who's here on his team, staffing the truck. If you have any questions, he's eager to meet all the electric companies he can while he's here. So one of the last items that Rakesh actually mentioned in his presentation was that exciting collaboration between Daimler Truck North America, BlackRock, and ev.energy, which I think is exactly the kind of partnership we're going to need to see to get more of this EV infrastructure out there, whether we're talking about medium heavy-duty vehicles or light-duty vehicles. Now, of course, Florida Power Light, the video you just saw, part of the ev.energy family, is one of those companies that's also doing a great job of really thinking about this comprehensive solution to EV charging. So Florida Power & Light, FPL, also brought a Rivian truck. This is what you're seeing here, this pickup truck. That's also out in EV Alley. Be sure to check that out. The electric pickup truck, I just want to say, has been sort of the holy grail of the EV market for a long time. We've all been asking and waiting for this to happen. As you all know, pickups dominate the U.S. auto market. It's like Ford sells 700,000 of F-150 equivalents a year. So this is really exciting to see this happen. So I'm really excited that FPL could bring the Rivian here out of their fleet for the day and share it with us. On the next slide here, we also have the Arrival van, which is a prototype delivery van that also we're thrilled to have here. If you've been following the trends in this space as the way we have, you'll know that these last mile delivery applications are really primed for electrification. They have relatively short fixed routes, return to base for overnight charging. UPS, for example, made a big order with Arrival for some of these vehicles. So really excited they're here. And as I think hopefully some of you just heard from the fleet electrification breakout where we had Ford over there talking about their e-transit, this is also in this space. And Ted Kenneth pointed out, this isn't just last mile delivery, it's plumbers, it's service trucks, it's a lot of different applications that are going to be looking for electric vans. So really excited about that. So on your way out to EV Alley, which I know I've been promoting a lot, be sure to check it out. On the way, you'll see the FreeWire charging station. I think it has the electric Harley-Davidson parked next to it right now. So FreeWire is helping also to address the need for EV fast charging, but really the really unique way. They have an integrated battery storage system built into the actual charging unit, which can really help reduce the impact to the energy grid. So in a moment, I'll ask my next panel to come up on stage while we're playing this video clip, but I want you to see sort of FreeWire's perspective on DC fast charging. So take a look. right, excellent. Thanks for that from FreeWire. So now we're going to transition to talk about the National Electric Highway Coalition, and we're going to make sure we got a mic for Marty here. Thank you, Jackie. So I'm really excited here to have our next panel discussion. It's my great honor to have Lisa Barton here, Executive Vice President for and Chief Operating Officer, I should say, for American Electric Power. Thanks for being here.
Great to be here.
And Marty Lyons, President and CEO of Ameren, who now I think we have a mic.
I'm good to go.
All right.
Thanks, Kellen.
Thanks, Marty. Thanks so much. So to set the stage here, I want to give a little bit of background before we get into the discussion around what the National Electric Highway Coalition is. So to get everyone up to speed on that, quick reminder on what we're trying to accomplish here. The goal of the National Electric Highway Coalition is really to support EV fast charging for EV drivers, to really give them the confidence they need to traverse all our member companies' service territories. It's a relatively simple idea, but actually a really tough one to execute. Requires really thinking about what the customer needs and putting their needs front and center for solving this problem, to think beyond sort of the traditional electric company service territory boundaries. I'm really excited to show that we have more than 60 of electric company members as part of the National Electric Highway Coalition. So the membership is quite vast, and what you're showing here is the service territories of the members, but really this is just the starting point. And so I mentioned earlier in the forecast the need for 140,000 DC fast charging ports by 2030. That's what EEI is projecting. We have a long way to go, I think, is the bottom line to meet that need. So on this chart, what we're showing in that sort of light blue slice is the existing fast charging ports, about 10,000 non-proprietary chargers out there today. That makes up about 7% of the need. This NEVI funding that we've been talking about, the National EV Infrastructure Program from the federal government, $5 billion over 5 years, we think that could easily double what's built out, so that maybe covers another 14%. We're also showing public announcements from some of the major charging operators out there, Electrify America, EVgo, that collectively makes up maybe another 8%. We asked the members of our National Electric Highway Coalition how many ports they're going to be supporting directly through things like financial incentives, make-ready infrastructure, anything sort of beyond business as usual to help support the deployment. And we think they'll make up about 4,500 or so DC fast charging ports over the next several years. So a really significant slice, but still just 3% of what we need. So I think the idea behind the NEHC is to really support that most foundational, critical 3% of this need, to spur the rest of that 68% that we need other entities to help fill in the gaps here. So as I mentioned today, NEHC members deploying these things through lots of different mechanisms, working with corporate customers like Walmart. I know they got a shout out earlier for their public fast charging, but other corporate customers like them who have great facilities to offer for a location for DC fast charging, trying to partner with them through this coalition as well. So again, I'm really excited to have you both here, and we can get into a little bit more of how your companies are helping to support public fast charging. So maybe Lisa, let's start with you. This National Electric Highway Coalition, as I described, is really focused on a relatively niche but really important segment within EV charging. A lot of players in this space, federal government bringing a lot of dollars here potentially. What do you see as sort of the electric company role here? Why do you think our industry is well suited to help fill in some of these gaps?
When you really think about EV infrastructure and just the use of EVs, you're really looking into the future. And so it's such an incredible time to be in this industry and to be figuring out how do we ensure that our customers and our communities are successful, because our success is completely dependent on their success. I mean, that's the exciting thing about this industry. We are here for our customers and communities and making sure they thrive in a clean energy economy. And when you think about it with respect to electric vehicle infrastructure, charging infrastructure, and you think about how rural vast amounts of this country are, we have to make sure that we're giving those communities the ability to compete in a clean energy economy. And how we do that is to really lean in and try and help solve this challenge. And there really isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to this. This is just a situation where we all need to make sure that we're working together to make this happen. And so, when we were talking about this internally, the challenge that we had for ourselves is, boy, if you wanted to get from Chicago to DC or Chicago to Louisiana, you have to go through AEP service territory. So, and if you just look around Columbus, for example, it's 2.5 hours to Cincinnati, 2.5 hours to Cleveland. And so we knew right away that we really had to be part of that solution. And so, we're really trying to target this a number of different ways. We're not trying to edge out any other entities. We just really want to help jumpstart where the market isn't there. And I think that that's a perfect place for utilities to be part of that solution. We need to serve all of our customers all the time. And so, being able to really just jumpstart that technology is something that will allow us to really jumpstart electrification more broadly.
I think that's so well said, and a key message we're trying to get across with that, forecast we showed, where we have that really critical role to play, but there's so much of this market that others can really run with, is the idea that we can really spur that. So thank you for that. Marty, similar question to you. How is your company thinking about your strategy around meeting this driver need? How does it fit into your sort of overall goals as Ameren?
Yeah, thanks. Kellen, and Lisa's answer was great, and I think part of the beauty of this highway coalition is that with 60 utilities, we're all very much like-minded. We work in different states with different geographies, et cetera, but we're very much like-minded in terms of looking to the future and wanting to make sure that we're building out the infrastructure that our customers are going to need in the future. As Lisa was talking about, I was thinking about our vision of leading the way to a sustainable energy future, and thinking about our customers and their own carbon reduction goals, thinking about how we can help to facilitate that, looking ahead to the fact that all of these great vehicle models are going to be coming their way to our customers, and we're going to want them to adopt them for a number of reasons. One, because they're great for the environment. Number two, because we really do believe that they're going to be cheaper to own and operate for our customers over the long haul. And so we want to make sure we're ahead of that and facilitating that. In Missouri and Illinois, we've got a mix of urban, large suburban areas. As Lisa said, we also have a lot of rural areas, and people drive a long way. And one of the big inhibitors we all know to people adopting electric vehicles is that range anxiety. And what we wanted to do is get ahead of that. We wanted to partner with like-minded utilities. We wanted to put together a program where we had charging corridors along major thoroughfares. So as Lisa said, if you're going from St. Louis to Kansas City, St. Louis to Chicago, or to Columbus, that you had that charging network available to rely upon. And we wanted to get ahead of that. And again, we operate in Missouri and Illinois, Ameren does, and we wanted to work with our regulators in each state to map that out and then put the right programs in place for each of our states, and then work with all of the other utilities that were part of these coalitions to allow them to work with their regulators and work with their local authorities to do what was right in their states, but ultimately to have this network that all of our customers could rely upon.
That's great. I think that's why we're so excited both of your organizations are here. You both really led, I think, the leadership to kind of bring this together, right, this coalition. So we really thank you for that. And I think you said it perfect, Marty. One of the things we're trying to balance is some of our members have different levers they can pull depending on their regulatory environment and the kind of goals of the company. So I mentioned, some of our members are deploying these things through incentives like rebates. Maybe they're doing customer side make-ready work. Some are owning and operating them as sort of a service for a site host customer. I'd love to hear maybe an example or two from your organizations for how you're doing it. Which structure are you sort of looking at, and maybe an example or two where you've worked so far? Go back to Lisa for that.
Sure. So the one thing that we know is there is no one size fits all.
Yeah.
Each of the different jurisdictions is at a different place and has different goals and so forth. So, we've been working with each of them. And in Ohio, for example, what we offer, we have a pilot that offers a rebate. On average, it's about $75,000, and we've got about 53 DC fast chargers out there. So that's been a strong foothold for us in Ohio. In Indiana, we're part of a utility coalition, so we're all working together with the Volkswagen dollars to figure out what's the best placement across the state. And in Oklahoma, which is one of actually my favorite stories, we did partner with FreeWire. Oklahoma just did an amazing job with respect to taking advantage of tax credits as well as the Volkswagen dollars. And so what they have is a charging station every 50 miles. And in McAllister, which is one of our communities, the population of 18,000, there's a taxi company, an all-electric taxi company. And they're providing service to their community. And, it's a wonderful thing to see in McAllister with a population of only 18,000, and it's not near anywhere. It's not near a large population center, but they are really living the future. And that kind of stuff is just absolutely exciting.
That's great, and it shows kind of piecing together all these different elements to kind of make the package work, so that's great. Marty, what about your company? Any examples you'd point out for how you've got it done?
Yeah, well, like Lisa, there's not a one-size-fits-all, and it's a little bit different in each of the states we operate. But, one thing I'd say first, before even getting into the specifics on, charging infrastructure is, as we go through our grid modernization in both Illinois and Missouri, and we upgrade substations, and we think about the infrastructure investments we're going to make, we're already partnering with a lot of the businesses as well as public transportation as we think about modernization of substations, new substations, upgraded capabilities, helping to facilitate their move to adopt electric transportation. As it relates to the specific to the residential user, if you will, we've gone to the states, and I'll take Missouri first. We identified about 40 locations across the state that we really thought represented sort of a minimum viable charging network. As you've illustrated, Kellen, we're going to need a lot more chargers than that. Yeah. But, in terms of this corridor, we really needed those. And so went to the state and then got authority to, in some cases, actually pay for 100% of the build out of those with a combination of fast chargers as well as level 2 chargers, but also then work with other businesses that were interested in hosting a site where we would pay up to 50% of the cost of actually putting the charging infrastructure in. And so had the opportunities to partner with hotels and grocery stores and restaurants that were willing to host it, and ultimately then they own and operate that charging infrastructure. But again, with the goal, and I think we're about 75% of the way there in Missouri, of getting these 40 charging stations built out. And so we're doing that. In Illinois, have line extension subsidies that we can provide to make sure that that's done at very low cost. We have special rates for charging vehicles. So a number of things that, again, we have the opportunity to work with our regulators and facilitate, again, the proliferation of these EV chargers. So
that's great. So yeah, even in one company, it sounds like you both have your different jurisdictions doing different things based on where you are. So I mean, that's great. I think it illustrates kind of the diversity of kind of what we're seeing in terms of the approaches here. Last question for you both. I mentioned the NEVI program, the National EV Infrastructure Program, the federal funded $5 billion that'll go to the state DOTs over the next 5 years. Really excited that the NEHC was really pulled together ahead of that, so we had a chance to get some of our coordination together because I think it's going to be really important to think about how we can complement now this new injection of federal dollars. I think one of the key points is I don't think even the federal dollars will solve the problem for us, kind of based on what we showed there, but I think to the extent we can make those dollars even go further and make sure they're efficiently deployed is in all of our best interests. So I'm curious to hear from you both. Are you working with your states yet on this? How can the NEHC and this work here help what you're doing in your states and make sure those federal dollars are well deployed? So, Lisa?
Well, first, Kellen, I really want to thank you and your team for the outstanding leadership that you have provided through all of this. I mean, this is rapidly changing space, and making sure that we've got a voice out there, the ability to access these dollars. So we, within AEP, are working very closely with our state DOTs. We really feel that they are central to making this happen, and I think that they really recognize the need. Particularly, when you're in the Midwest, the one thing those DOTs recognize is the fact that you have to move. There's a lot of traffic moving through that state, right? And so they know that this is an important part of the solution, and one that just really can't happen probably organically. I mean, when you've got really rural territories, we're going to need to all work together. And so the solutions are going to need to be far more collaborative. We're going to need to look for as many funding sources as we possibly can to make this a success. And, it's really, I think, one of those situations where all boats rise in a rising tide, and we just have to be working together as much as we possibly can to make sure we're taking advantage of those dollars that are so fundamentally needed in our states.
Well, that's great, and that's one of our key messages has been, don't wait for the state DOTs to come to you. Start working with them because they're going to need a lot of support. Marty, last question for you. Any early experiences from your territories, Missouri or Illinois, what you're seeing working with the states?
I would first of all, I'd echo Lisa's thanks to you, and the facilitation you're providing as we all work with our state departments of transportation to access this money. and that urging is the right thing. As utilities, we have terrific relationships. I mentioned the regulators a number of times, but really throughout government, all different government agencies, obviously with the governor and the legislature, et cetera. But, we have a real opportunity to provide that leadership in our states with the departments of transportation. This is all new to them too, right? This is something that they're embracing for the first time. And I'm really thankful, and I'm thankful too for our Ameren team that's here today, because they were the ones that really, went out and helped to form this coalition, to do the mapping, to work with our customers, to figure out what their needs were. And that's the kind of information that's really helping us now to work and lead with the Missouri Department of Transportation, the Illinois Department of Transportation, to help them sort of get a jump start. I think this coalition helping to provide, I'll say, best practices as we as peers can share information, what's working, but really help the folks in our state to best position ourselves. And I guess we all want a piece of this money, but to position ourselves to get some of that federal money and make the right proposals and the right pitches for our state to be able to access that. But again, the coalitions and the work that's been done over time, I think, really gives us a head start with those state agencies.
Great. Well, Marty, Lisa, again, thank you for your leadership in helping to pull this coalition together so EEI could go and run with it, and we're all excited to be a part of it. So, and thank you for the discussion today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Kellen.
Future. Thank you.
All right, and before we bring up the next panel here, I want to make a quick note. EEI just launched a new website, The Electric Generation, which will be our platform for telling our stories around how our members are helping to lead across electric transportation, initially focused, of course, on the National Electric Highway Coalition. So keep an eye on this. Go to theelectricgeneration.org, and you can find all the stories that we'll be telling about the coalition. And so now we have our next panel here. I'm really excited about this one. We're talking about bringing the technologies to EV charging. We have a great range of panelists here, so I will hand it over to Vida Asiegbu to kick this off, Principal with Energy Impact Partners. Thanks, Vida.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and it's great to see everyone here. Thank you for joining for this panel. This has been a great session to have, or a great experience to have after being locked in for 2 years. So happy to see everyone here. But, we have a great panel here with really the fruit of the labor between EIP and our utilities partners. And so when it comes to the proliferation of electrical vehicles, we have, some of the best and brightest minds from our portfolio. So, without further ado, it would be great to hear each of your backgrounds. Louis, Kameale, Joseph, introduce yourselves and let us know how you all are participating in EV proliferation and standards and changing the standards for the energy industry.
Maybe just I'll start. Louis Tremblay, President and CEO of Flow. I funded Flow back in 2009. We are a vertically integrated company, meaning that we provide charging in all market segments, from home, MERB, fleet, workplace, curbside, fast charging. We have 60,000 chargers. Around 20,000 of those chargers are commercial, 1,500 are fast chargers. So we deployed really them from curbside to countryside across the United States and across Canada. We just launched our assembly facility in Michigan, so we'll be manufacturing chargers next fall from Michigan. And we're really there to provide a reliable service. Our network is there to make sure EV driver can rely on great chargers. So we have 98% uptime. So 98% of the time the chargers are working. And we really think this is how we can help the EV adoption to accelerate.
Hi, how y'all doing? My name is Kameale. I'm the CEO of ChargerHelp. We fix electric vehicle charging stations and support software providers and manufacturers in ensuring that they have good uptime. Prior to this role, I started off very early on working directly with utility rebate programs and being really the driver support for a network provider. So when stations were deployed and folks got stranded places or needed assistance, I was the person that they got to chat with. And I really learned a lot during that time period of, one, understanding that ensuring reliable infrastructure is a lot more complex than we thought, and that there's a lot of opportunity to gather data in order for us to build better and more reliable infrastructure. And that's really what ChargerHelp has been able to do. We've been able to not only create good green jobs by allowing the local folks to go out there and fix stations, but we've been able to be an asset to the industry to be in order to show folks where there's failure points, whether it's on the hardware side or the software or the payment processing system or the cloud. And so I'm super excited to be here and be able to share some of the neat data sets that we found out.
Hi there, I'm Joseph from ev.energy. We are actually a software company, so we don't do infrastructure. We connect to infrastructure and integrate it into the power grid. So I think we saw a few presentations ago, 30 million EVs, hundreds of thousands of chargers across the country, hundreds of millions of chargers across the country by the end of the decade. Our job really is to connect to all of those assets, stream the data, control and optimize the charging, and integrate it into utilities' power grids. And in doing so, make EV charging easier for the utility, but also make sure that those benefits and the financial savings as well, whether that's NWA or something else, is passed back on to the EV driver and get EV drivers actually utilizing all the infrastructure that utilities are deploying.
Thank you, three. Definitely appreciate it. So, when it comes to just the expansion in the industry, over 2021, we saw 6.6 million EVs that were, manufactured, brought to the market, which is double that of 2020. And so when it comes to the expansion, it's growing fast and furious, and infrastructure is not keeping up, and software is not keeping up with that. When it comes to the participation with utilities, how would you say that your companies are, smoothing that transition that we need to have within the industry, and then also when it comes to, the deployment of the utilities asset, this utilities asset in the market? How has that differed?
Yeah,
If you'd like to
I can start. Yeah, so, early on, a lot of utility commissions weren't allowing owner-operated infrastructure. And so with that split, you would have some folks, right, through rebate programs, so you may have a small business that now owns infrastructure. And this is the first time that they've ever earned a fueling source. And what we started to see now going out to fix some of those stations, we actually see that there's better uptime in utility-owned infrastructure than there is in rebate-owned infrastructure. However, usually both infrastructure has utility wrappings on it. And so what we've been able to, and so what that then results is that the ratepayer doesn't know the difference. They just know that the station doesn't work and the utility wrapping is on it. And so what we've been able to do is to go out and assess stations to provide data sets, not only what is the software saying that the station is online or not, but is the station actually functioning, which we often see that there is a discrepancy between the two. And by being able to get that on-site data and being able to route it back to show, okay, the utility-owned usually has a higher uptime, and this is where we see rebate-owned stations, we've been able to really help a lot of utilities prove out the case for utility-owned infrastructure. So that's one of the ways that we've been helpful so far. And then the other piece is really being able to back up reliability, right? 97% uptime means that a station is offline for 11 days out of a calendar year. We don't see that with oil and gas. So how do we have higher uptime and reliability? How do we roll the truck faster? How do we get predictive analytics? And so that's the second way that we've been able to be pretty helpful.
If I can make some more comments on that, you opened the door of reliability, but I would say 30% of our sales are utility. I would say we're born working with utility out of Canada and now in the US working with other utilities. So utility are a really demanding customer, which is really, really good because, through the years, what we want to do is to accelerate the EV adoption. So how do we accelerate EV adoption? It doesn't happen overnight. It happens, over decades. So working with utility, we've learned how to make our product better, to make our software better, and to make sure we provide a great service. So year after years, we have to make sure that our service is meeting our hardest, more demanding requirement. So we've worked with ChargerHelp, for instance, and we've made a consumer protection legislation bill in California where we require the network operating company to be disclosing EV charging reliability data. So we hope that bill will go through. But the thing is, we want to make sure that EV charging network are accountable and publicly funded infrastructure are also reliable. So this is something we need to see more and more. And just to make some more way onto this, Plug-in America just surveyed EV drivers, and 54% of those people, the respondents, said that they have problem accessing public charging. And why? The first reason, malfunctioning station. So this is something unacceptable. There've been in the last 13 years a lot of dots on the map that have been deployed. And when we look at the next 10 years or 13 years ahead, we must make sure that those charging stations going to be reliable, whether or not they're deployed, with utilities or on the rebate program.
Yeah, and I think just sort of listening to the previous talk with Ameren and AEP, there is such a focus right now on deploying that infrastructure. Then I think, where we've seen, like in California, maybe some more infrastructure being deployed, then the utilities start to think, oh, well now what, right? Actually, we've got all these chargers. Our customers are actually using them. How do we actually manage this load in an intelligent way so as not to overwhelm the power grid? And what do we do with that Make Ready program where we just deployed a bunch of non-network chargers into customers' homes, and suddenly now we need to modulate or control or optimize that charging? And so that's really where ev.energy comes in, is kind of providing the smarts behind the scenes to optimize charging, whether it's in public, whether it's in a residential space, as sort of the next step in the utilities journey after that infrastructure has been deployed, to ensure that it's actually properly integrated into the power grid.
Can I make a last comment and link it to your first question about standard that we didn't answer? But we have the privilege to be a vertically integrated player. So we are there at any process, developing the chargers, the software, manufacturing it, developing the software, and operating it. So, but it shouldn't be like a particular business model that win. This should be a standard of the industry. We should make sure that the next, highway deployment that's going to be done is going to be reliable.
And so just taking off from that point on reliability, can I ask what your thoughts have been when it comes to the standards that are coming through with the infrastructure bill that is currently in process? There is also this, request of the states to submit their recommendations for what expenses are going to be attributable to this bill by August 1st. Could I ask each of you to share your thoughts, to the extent that you can, about, what is it that is on your wish list of items that need to be included for, these proposal submissions?
Yeah, so I've been now in the industry almost 9 years and have seen a lot that has happened over time. And so looking at the guidelines, I think that there's so much that we can gather from what we've already done. And one of those things is that we don't serve ourselves well when we couple installation and operations and maintenance funding, also when it's a part of the same RFP. Because oftentimes what happens is that you'll eat into your budget of install into O&M. And so that O&M funding that was designated to carry that charging infrastructure through for 5 or 10 years is now non-existent. And so when a station does experience an issue, there is no more funding left. And so that's one thing that I haven't seen the guidelines address. However, what we've been working on with states is to say that you have to decouple the funding. You have to have a funding for your install and your software on that end, but there should be a separate funding, a separate RFP process for the maintenance component, also because most of the issues aren't electrical. So typically your installer is not going to be the person that's going to go out and maintain your infrastructure. Every time we roll a truck, we go with a laptop and a Cat5 connector, right? And I have electrical contractor partners. They don't want to take a laptop and plug it into a charging station. It's a different skill set. And then the other thing that we really, did like that happen was this 97% uptime per charging station. But the part that we want to see added to, right, the reason we love working with Flow is because they're vertically integrated. So if I give Flow feedback on the hardware or the software, it's all within the same organization to fix that. Most of our infrastructure is not vertically integrated, right? Your manufacturer is different from your software provider, which is different from the car OEM. And so when we talk about master service agreements or service level agreements, Usually it only falls on the manufacturer. So if you have a software issue, the warranty actually doesn't matter, right? Because you can't prove that it's not a hardware problem. So we're like, one, like let's separate the funding, and then two, you should have MSAs and SLAs for the software and the hardware provider if they're not vertically integrated.
I want to echo that for sure. We need to make sure we don't only provide funding for the infrastructure from the initial deployment, but we must make sure that those stations going to be operates. And when I saw the 97% uptime guideline, I think it's a good beginning, but still 97%, it's I would say it's low compared to other market. So we need to raise that. But more important, what we need to take care of is the formula that calculate that 97%, because it's easy, to be lazy, I would say it like that. But it needs to be stringent, but from my team feedback on the formula that it's put in the guidance, it look a bit like we are doing at Flow, and I think it's really encouraging. And it's going to be better for definitely from the last 10 years, but we should improve in the next coming years as well.
Yeah, and I think beyond reliability, one of the major sort of pain points that we hear from EV drivers, because we are driver facing as well at ev.energy, is around payments at public chargers. And for anyone who's driven an EV and sort of had to charge on the go, it's kind of like the Wild West. You go to some stations, yeah, some of them are not working. When a station is working, sometimes you have to download a special app and connect your credit card in order to pay. Others you can just tap with a contactless card. Others require a special RFID card. It's a nightmare for the driver. And utilities are spending billions of dollars installing all these chargers, and then drivers just might not use them, right? Or might not be able to use them. And so I would also like to see some sort of standards around payments as well. We do quite a bit of work in the UK, actually, where the government now has set standards around payments, and all public chargers going forward need to be able to accept contactless, right? That's been an amazing thing that I've seen in this country over the past few years, is just contactless payments everywhere. Not yet at public EV chargers, but I'm hopeful that that'll roll out in the next few years.
Definitely appreciate it. So let's pivot just a touch here. When it comes to the equal access and equal distribution of EV charging, in the communities that you're serving, some of you have it as one of your core ethos, making sure that there is, truly diversity and inclusion as part of your company's ethos. It'd be great to hear, more about how you're thinking about rolling that out, expanding, within different communities as well with your products and services.
Sure, I can start. I would say that equitable and comprehensive deployment is really, really important. And the way we think about it is that, we cannot only deploy in urban and suburban where there's a business case, and we cannot only deploy residential charger or home charging where people have garage. We need to think about both. Rural, remote location where we need to install fast chargers that won't be profitable maybe for 15 years. And we need to make sure that garage orphan access also charging infrastructure. So the way we look at it is we must not only look at a specific chargers, but we need to look at it as a network perspective. So when we think about deploying station, again, this is not an overnight success. It will be over the next decade. We need to make sure that the infrastructure is available for two reasons. Because people need to charge every day, sometimes in urban location, but people need to feel safe. People need to feel that they can charge everywhere. And this is a big anxiety. We used to talk about range anxiety, but people that are buying cars need to be able to think they can go at the countryside and be charging. Maybe if it's happened only once a year, they need to think about that. And for people that have low income, they need to access charging as well. They need to think they can benefit also for the benefits of electric car, even though sometime it might be not next year, but in the coming years, we need to make sure that these people access also to the EV. And this is something we've seen from deployment in community not that far from here, New York, with Con Edison. We started in the Bronx before starting in Fifth Avenue, and we have great take rate, great usage, and making sure we offer equitable deployment for these people.
Thanks, Kameale. I think one of the sort of gaps that we've seen, I think, are particularly for renters and multi-unit dwelling residents, in kind of the home charging space. Some folks are lucky enough to live near a flow charger in the Bronx, and they can just sort of charge on the street. It's not the case yet for a lot of folks. It's really interesting. I mentioned we do a lot of work in the UK. They've actually rolled out lamppost chargers across the country, just leveraging existing wiring and lampposts and putting in chargers now sort of everywhere on the streets. So every lamppost is a charger, which is pretty cool. But we still see gaps in certain populations. I think particularly renters is another one, another one that gets overlooked, who are not always able to take advantage of make-ready programs, right, or rebate programs to get a nice level 2 charger with a $500 rebate because their landlord won't let them install one, or they need to bring an electrician or whatever it is. So we also think about those folks and sort of getting them the charging infrastructure they need. We've actually partnered with a California business to bring to market a special sort of level 1, level 2 charging cable specifically for renters and MUD residents. And the really unique thing about it is that it's smart, it's networked, internet connected. The utility is not only getting the charging data from it, it's also able to control and modulate its charging as well. Again, sort of being able to connect all of that infrastructure back into the power grid.
Yeah, for ChargerHelp, it's been such a fascinating, really, approach. It first started off with my co-founder. She established an ONET code with the Department of Labor for EVSE technician. And having that job code allowed us to do two things, not just for ChargerHelp, but for the industry as a whole, was one, that we set a standard for a pay rate, where for an EVSE technician, you can't get paid anything less than $30 an hour. And the minimum requirement was a high school diploma. And so that was the first thing that we wanted to do when it came to equity, because we knew that while, yes, reliability was a challenge for this industry, when we think about smart cities and deployment of IoT assets, these skill sets that we're looking for, folks that I need you to learn things, within a week, because tomorrow with a firmware update, it might be completely different, right? But people can learn that quickly, right? Like, we can utilize technology and utilize different platforms to help and enable learning. And so that was the one thing that we thought about equity, and what that resulted in specifically at ChargerHelp is that 62% of my technicians are Black and brown. A third of my technicians come from oil and gas. And the most incredible part is that we had 5 technicians buy electric vehicles after 3 quarters of working at the company. And so equity to us is not just merely deploying charging stations, it's allowing people to participate, not as a handout, but because they actually do really good work. They enjoy their jobs. And so we think about equity from a workforce enablement standpoint through our technology platform, which is ChargerHelp technology. And then we also think about equity and reliability of infrastructure. I'm from South Central Los Angeles. I still live in South Central Los Angeles. And I say it all the time, don't put charging stations in my community if they're not going to work, right? Because we rely on infrastructure. We don't have opportunity to have charging stations in our garages. So it's like we have to create good jobs. We have to lean into technology to help for workforce enablement. And we have to deploy reliable charging infrastructure if we want this, the space to be equitable.
Last comment. So we're in a utility forum conference. So the things that I want to stress is we work with utilities still. You were talking about a light pole charging station. We're doing that with LA, reliable chargers. But the thing we need to work with utility, they have space because they did the conversion to LED. So they have 6,000 poles that we are electrifying every year in LA. But the thing is, there might be other places where we want to deploy chargers that it's not possible yet. We see that with Con Ed. We need to plan that 10 years ahead. Again, it's not an overnight success, but we all need to work together to make sure that it's going to happen for the greater good.
Thank you, and thank you 3. It's great to hear your perspectives. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective with the group. If you don't hear it enough, please just know that we're so proud of all the work that the 3 of your companies do. It's an honor to partner with you in our portfolio. Before we close, I do have a lightning round question. I'd like to hear from each of you. What is your dream EV that you would like to own?
All right, it's my turn to go first. Well, I just put it in an order for a Tesla Model Y, so I think that's probably my answer. Sorry, really lame, really common, nothing more interesting.
I really want an electric jet. And there's this company called Ampere that I made friends with the CEO last week and requested my discount. So, yeah.
So I drive a Model Y, but I ordered the Cybertruck, the Lightning, and the Hummer, and whatever comes first, it's going to be my dream car.
Well, thank you. You heard it here first. These. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you, Vida, and to all the panelists. That was an excellent discussion. One of the things we're challenged to do in this space is actually keep track of everything that's going on. So one thing I just wanted to share really quickly to remind folks, this publicly available database of EEI member company EV programs is available on our website, eei.org. We have more than 300 entries in this database showing various customer-facing programs that our members have in the field, whether that's supporting fleets or home charging or commercial charging. So make sure you check that out, because that's a good resource for folks to have on hand. And now I will welcome my next panel up to the stage. You all are ahead of me. Thank you. This is excellent. No, we're good. So I want to welcome my next panel here. Let me make sure I flip to your names here so folks know who you are. So I'm really excited today to have Chris Black, CEO of GridX, with us. We have Justin Sufan, Head of Utility Partnerships for Motor, and then Divesh Gupta, Director of Strategy on the Utility of the Future team at BGE. So thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it. Thanks. So our last segment here is connecting customers to EVs, and I think what we'll hear here is a variety of approaches to sort of solving customer issues, each taking sort of a different tact. So I'd love each of you to just share a few minutes on what your company is doing, what problem you're trying to solve, and how are you going about it. So Chris, we'll start with you.
Sure. Hi all. Chris Black, GridX. So GridX is the rate analytics platform that sells to regulated utilities to solve time of use rate, develop and manage time of use rates kind of in the long term. So we're really solving kind of four problems for our utility partners. The first is developing those rates. The rates aren't available enough in enough areas, but the demand for them obviously organically is growing. We then help utilities solve the problems of analyzing the right rates and targeting the right customers for the right rates. And so we do both direct support there with our solutions with utilities like PG&E and consumers to directly show consumers kind of what their bills would be down to the dollars and cents if they were on the right rate or on different rates that might match them. And that's a really hard problem, right? Usually when people have an energy impact, they talk about the cost savings if you were to take an action to your energy, but your energy often doesn't make up even the majority of your bill. It's all the other taxes and tariffs and fees and riders, and so we are able to do that down to dollars and cents, and so we make it very real to consumers. The third is then engaging with those consumers. So usually consumers may not even know that they have rate options available or what those might be. So we partner with the engagement providers like the Uplights and O-Powers and Bidgely's and SEWs of the world to make our technology available throughout that engagement experience. And then finally, we do kind of ongoing population analysis as utility rates are changing to make sure that those rates are best matched for both the utility and the consumers. So a whole swath of things.
That's great. I mean, we just heard on the residential session earlier how important time of use rates are going to be in particular, or other dynamic pricing to make sure that the EV load, when you add it to a home, is sort of going to the place where there is capacity to serve it. So great. Thank you for that, Chris. Justin, we'll go to you. What problem are you solving, and how are you going about it?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Justin Sufan. I head up utility partnerships for Motor. Motor is a startup that's incubated out of the AES Corporation, and we have a mission to accelerate consumer EV adoption. We started this business because transportation still constitutes the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in this country. And when you take a look at that piece of the pie, the largest segment of that are light-duty vehicles, the vehicles that we all drive. So utilities are doing something because of this, right? A lot of utilities are investing in infrastructure, deploying a myriad of charging stations, innovating on rate design and supportive policy, and rightfully so. What we're seeing, though, is that the vehicles are not transitioning quickly enough. Last year, new EV sales were around 3% of total US sales in the country. So what should we do about that, right? If you sample any utility earnings call, and I do, because I'm sort of a nerd in that way, you'll see that electrification or electric sales is likely, their number one EPS sensitivity, right? Loads are flat or declining. At the same time, a lot of utility executives are talking about beneficial electrification programs to keep rates affordable. So we created Motor so utility executives won't have to bet their EPS or their affordability metrics on what happens at the showroom floor at a dealership. Simply, Motor offers, through a utility marketplace where customers are already used to going for thermostats or heat pumps, electric car subscriptions, electric car purchases with bundled charging installation and rate enrollment. So your customers know the utility, and now they can go to the utility to get into an electric vehicle quickly. And I'll just quickly mention some of our partners and our customers. We partnered with the utility in Indianapolis, our sister company, AS Indiana. Within 1 year, Motor accounted for over 20% of new EV growth in that territory. And I'll talk specifically just about one Motor member. Her name's Yolanda. She had a medical incident, and she lost her car a year ago. She was having a really difficult time getting into a car. And she ended up learning about Motor through a bill insert that her utility sent her. In fact, the majority of our customers that enter Motor at our comfort tier, which is our basic tier, find Motor through the utility bill insert. So it shows you the power of the utility's reach. So what we found is if you want an equitable transition to EVs, you want to keep rates affordable, you want to boost your electric sales, you got to bring more than the chargers. You got to bring the cars and an easy way to get customers to say yes more quickly.
Great. Thanks, Justin. Divesh, how about you? What are you working on? What are you trying to solve?
Yeah, so one of the things I love about being at a utility company in particular is when you think about strategy, you can think about how can we make sure that this strategy is benefiting all of our customers, right? Not just those that can afford, say, a Tesla, $50,000, $70,000 vehicle, but how can we bring technology to everybody and make sure that everybody's getting benefits? And so in this particular case that I'll talk about, the last panel touched on it, right, in terms of equity of chargers and public charging. Where are you putting it? But then you go a layer deeper and you think about, well, not only where are you putting it, is it actually providing benefits to the communities where you're putting it? And so, we had been authorized to put in 500 public chargers across central Maryland and to try to site them in places where the private networks weren't going, try in infills in neighborhoods, in rural areas, in our cities, in limited income neighborhoods. And it's one thing to build the charging infrastructure, site it, build it, all of that, but how do you make sure that it's not a bridge to nowhere, or that it's not just a resource that somebody passing through uses without benefits for the community that are there? So we started with the team thinking about that. How can we solve that problem? And what we ended up finding out is that by thinking about that problem and thinking about equity, trying to innovate around equity, we actually ended up solving for a whole lot of other problems too. Some of the things that you're talking about too, and these different creative ways that you can drive EV adoption. So the thought that we had was, well, let's try to electrify rideshare. We'd seen it done a couple of places. Atlanta was doing it a bit. I think they were doing it out west. Maybe it was in Seattle as well. We'd seen Lyft had some programs, and we thought, okay, why don't we take that model and try to have a focus on equity in that model too? And as it turned out, there was a really good fit there. And we went out, we pitched a Department of Energy grant, and were awarded it as part of a coalition of a number of companies in the Mid-Atlantic. It's called the Mid-Atlantic Partnership. And we got the dollars through which we would be able to deploy 100 electric vehicles onto a rideshare platform, as well as upgrade the infrastructure that we would need to support those kinds of vehicles, so that we could start to think about how can we get people in these vehicles, driving in these vehicles, providing benefits. Can we think about some limited income rates for these vehicles too? The first 25 of 100 are hitting the roads this month. Maybe it might squeeze into July. We're waiting on license plates. And once we're there in market, then we'll start to think about some of those opportunities too. How can we create maybe some point-to-point opportunities for some of the communities where our charging infrastructure is located, so they can get to things like grocery stores, healthcare, jobs, all the necessities that we take for granted.
Well, that's great. I mean, I think you all heard a very different angle and different problem trying to solve in terms of getting rates right and how important that is, making sure drivers have visibility, making sure the buying process or the vehicle procurement, how you get in the hands of a vehicle can be easier, and then for even for people that aren't owning an EV necessarily can ride share, those kind of opportunities in communities. So a great diversity of examples here. I know we don't have a lot of time, and so I encourage everyone to find these gentlemen afterwards and talk about their solutions. But just quickly, I want to ask each of you what you've sort of learned so far. You all have innovative products in the field. So if you have an electric company coming up to you saying, I want to partner with you, or in your case, Divesh, maybe replicate kind of what you're doing, any couple of things you might share with them to head them down the right path or continue the conversation?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting stats is that something like 80% of Americans are eligible for time of use rates that are actually beneficial for them, save them money, benefit the grid. And something like 7 to 11% actually are enrolled in those. So I think it's one thing to think about. Okay, we're having more and more demand for time varying rates. We need to support use cases like EV rates, but be also, in that process, make sure you're also thinking about how do we make sure that we are targeting, informing, and registering people on. How are we doing the engagement and the outreach to make sure that the right people are on the right rates so that everyone benefits, everyone wins, the consumers win, and the utility gets the full value. So I think it's important to think about both of those aspects when you're considering new time of use rates.
Great. Justin?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my learnings, our learnings at Motor, are really impacted just by individual stories. And, I've been with the energy industry over 15 years and I've tried different EV things during my career history. And, we always heard the same things, right? Range anxiety, not a lot of options for cars. But what we found today is that it's just too hard to get into an electric car. When you have to go and wait 6 months to order a Tesla, or you have to go to a dealership and find someone who wants to sell you a gas-powered car, or you have to call an electrician or your utility, you're out. It's too much work. So simplifying the process, making it
Except
low
for
commitment.
Us, it's super easy.
Simplifying the process, making it low commitment is getting people into cars. And what the utility is seeing is the average or the typical Motor member is seeing an increase in load of about 40%. And they're sending the right market signals at the same time, so it's not contributing to their coincident peak.
Yeah, I think in our case, it's the bigger picture in terms of learning. It's that if you invest the time and the resources with your team and you really focus on innovation, you can drive benefits for communities equitably. You can drive benefits for shareholders. You can drive benefits for your state and the federal government in terms of the policies that they want to push, all at the same time. It just takes the energy and the focus on it.
Great. Well, gentlemen, I think we'll leave it there. I really appreciate your insights here, and thank you for being at EEI 2022. I know you can all find them if you want to talk more. I think you each have sort of places in the hub here to have further conversations. So I encourage you to look for them and continue the conversation. So thank you all.
Thanks
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you. All right, so the last piece of technology in the EV Alley that I didn't mention yet, we talked about all the other vehicles, I think, is the Terex all-electric bucket truck. So be sure to go check that out. That's a really exciting product, the first one of these actually on the market. And I think it really is indicative of our industry's effort to lead by example. Several years ago, EEI encouraged our members to set targets for their own internal fleet electrification. This vehicle is the first one of these that's really delivering for this particular segment with an all-electric solution. So really excited about that. And I think we all get the message that electric companies, if we're encouraging our customers to do this as we have throughout this conference, we need to show that we can do it ourselves. So last couple of notes I wanted to leave you with. Be sure to come to the reception and the dinner tonight. Be sure to come back tomorrow for the main morning keynote. That will include a fireside chat with Energy Secretary Granholm, and then, of course, another round of excellent breakout sessions. So thank you all for joining today for the Electric Transportation Experience, and enjoy the rest of your conference.
On the road again.